Okay, great. So, the last time when we were doing these, where we did genetic and we did biochemical, so those are physiological, right? So those are physiological explanations. Now we're going to do psychological explanations. Now, what is the difference between the two? So, physiological explanations are the ones to do with biology, right? So that has to do with the body, which could include your brain, your heart, your body, all of your body parts, everything that is included in biology, right? So that's physiological, which means PHYSI. Okay. But on the other hand, when we talk about psychological, that is to do with the brain, or that is mostly to do with the psyche, right? So it's all psychological explanations. It has nothing to do with your biology or your genetics or your biochemical treatments, etc. So the one that we'll be looking at right now is cognitive explanation. Just to review back as to what we're trying to do right now is that we're trying to see what are the reasons as to why a person may have schizophrenia, right? So we understand what schizophrenia is. Now we're just trying to understand why someone may have schizophrenia, right? So Frith was the one who actually conducted the study. Just one second. So sorry, yeah, I got a call, right? So what we were looking at is that we now understand what schizophrenia is. We're trying to see what causes schizophrenia, right? So first thing that we looked at was physiologically what can cause schizophrenia, which was that number one was um, genetically. So you can have schizophrenia because of your genes. If someone in your family has it, your immediate family is someone who suffers from schizophrenia, then you are likely to have them as well because it is carried down through your genes, right? At the same time, then we looked at another physiological explanation, which was dopamine deficiency, which means that if there's less amount of dopamine within your brain, or if your brain stops breaking down your dopamine particles, that also can cause schizophrenia, because what happens is that your brain functions slower. And when it functions slower, then behaviors such as delusions or behaviors such as hallucinations get common, right? Now we're looking at another explanation or another reason as to why someone may have schizophrenia. Now this is something that Frith is some a professor, right? She is someone who conducted this research about why people might get hallucinations when they have schizophrenia, right? So we're just going to read through it, and then we're going to uh, understand what she means, right? So Professor Chris Frith acknowledges that discussions about dopamine do not really explain, but there's also a subjective experience to it. As fascinating as up and down regulation may be, neither explains the development of bizarre false beliefs such as having one's thoughts extracted by aliens or government spies. In the 1990s, he advanced one of the first cognitive explanations of schizophrenia, assuming that both positive and negative symptoms result from faulty information processing, right? So essentially what's happening is um, they are trying to so basically Fritz said that it's not just dopamine. You can't just say that there's this dopamine deficiency because of which all of this is happening, because of which you might have hallucinations or you have delusions are as bizarre as thinking that someone's literally after you, and that doesn't happen because of dopamine. So he said that there are some issues with the way you're thinking, right? So there's this faulty thinking behind all of these delusions, right? So delusions is basically when you have false beliefs, right? You start believing something that is absolutely bizarre, that can possibly not be true, but you start believing in it, right? And you act according to it, right? So Fritz said that that's not just because of dopamine. You can't just say that it's because of dopamine deficiency. It has to be something beyond that. It has to be subjective beyond that. So he said that there is faulty thinking which is connected to having such delusions or having such false beliefs. So that is basically errors in self monitoring, right? So many people experience an internal monologue or voice, right? Which means that they subconsciously they have another voice which is telling them to do things, right? Everybody has a subconscious brain, but they've got this internal monologue where they struggle listening to, like, they struggle with their internal monologue in the sense that they want two things to happen simultaneously, and they struggle to see which one they'd want to do. They struggle to believe it one, right? So internal monologue, they've said, that is, we hear our thoughts as we read, write, and think about what we fancy for lunch. The cognitive theory of schizophrenia suggests that people with schizophrenia have difficulty distinguishing between auditory stimuli that occur outside their own mind and their self-generated inner voice. So they are saying, Fritz says, that there is a cognitive theory, right, which says that these people with schizophrenia have a difficulty in distinguishing, which means they have a difficulty in differentiating between what they basically think or believe themselves, right? So whatever is happening in their own mind, and then the other one's basically a self-generated inner voice, right? So things that basically the environment is showing them is basically something that is happening in their own mind. On the other hand, there are certain things that they're internally thinking. So for example, if someone's fighting, right? So if I were someone who had schizophrenia, I would be thinking, oh, someone's fighting. But maybe in my head, my internal voice is telling me someone's coming to hit you, right? So they've got these two, let's say, two differentiating brains, and they can't differentiate that which one's actually the realistic one, right? So it's not that they actually have this, right? It's not that they actually have two brains, but it's the fact that they cannot differentiate between what's happening in the environment and what they're hearing and looking at, etc., versus what they believe is happening, right? So they don't have that differentiation. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right. So they may mistakenly perceive their subvocal thoughts as coming from an external source. So that means that whatever they're thinking on their own, they may believe that coming from someone else, right? They may believe, oh, someone else is telling them, right? So this is the main issue with cognitive. Just give me 1 second. Sorry, yeah. So their main issue is that they cannot differentiate between what is actually true or what is something that someone's telling them versus what they think on their own, right? So that is what they mean by errors in self monitoring, that they do not really know what is their self telling them and what is actually true, right? And that is what leads to hallucinations, because they start believing in something that is not true. They start believing in something that is literally just in their own mind, okay? Then they're saying, likewise, experiences of influence can be understood with reference to person's inability to recognize the difference between internally and externally generated stimuli. These experiences may also be a way of understanding the experience of voice hearing. For example, I hear a voice but no one is present. The voice must have been transmitted via radio waves direct to my brain. This shows the possible link between abnormal sensory experience, which is hallucinations, and experiences of influence and formations of delusion. So what they're saying is that if someone's hearing a voice, they've given us an example which explains the whole point, which they're saying, if someone hears a voice and they say that, okay, I can hear someone, but there's nobody here, so this might be a radio speaking to me. So the point where they can hear someone, that is a hallucination. But the point where they start believing that, okay, if this is nobody speaking to me, this might be the radio, that is actually a false belief, which is we can call a delusion. And that is basically what happens with errors in self monitoring, that you have false beliefs. Okay. Number two is difficulties with mentalizing. So this, they're relating this to Baron Cohen, where you studied when we studied autism spectrum disorder, right? So they're saying the study investigated the validity of advanced theory of mind test, which was the read the mind in the eyes test. I hope you remember what I'm talking about. This test assesses the ability to attribute mental states to examining pair of eyes. This is known as mentalizing and is based on understanding that people can have intentions and mental states, and that differ from our own. So basically, even in Baron Cohen, we were trying to see if people can empathize, or if people with autism can actually tell what other people are thinking, right? That was the point. So over here as well, when they're talking about difficulty with mentalizing, that's exactly what they're talking about. They're saying that within such test, you can actually see if people have the ability to know what others are thinking, or if people have the ability to believe that their beliefs or their thoughts can be different from somebody else's, right? So that's basically what they're trying to see here as well. Schizophrenia has some overlaps with autism, right? So they're saying that schizophrenia in some sense can be similar to autism, or in some things about schizophrenia may be similar to autism. So Frith believes that difficulties in mentalizing may result from persecutory delusions and paranoia. If people with schizophrenia have difficulty understanding mental states, intentions, neutral behavior may be misinterpreted as hostility. Furthermore, an underdeveloped theory of mind may mean that people with schizophrenia believe that others have the same opinion as themselves. So basically, they're saying that people who have schizophrenia, what happens is, number one, they have very they have this huge barrier, or this difficulty in understanding others feelings and others thoughts and behaviors, right? So again, if they can't differentiate between their own thoughts and what's happening in the environment, they obviously cannot differentiate with what the other people are thinking. Number two, they also misinterpret, right? Because they have schizophrenia, they can't really understand what other people are thinking, and they misinterpret. So if someone is just looking at them, they might misinterpret that as, they're my enemy, and start thinking things. So again, what will happen here, they're going to start having delusions, just because they cannot differentiate. Now they are believing in something that's not really true, that's false, and that is essentially what causes delusions as well. This suggests that negative symptoms, if you remember, are the things that we basically lose, right? In schizophrenia, the positive symptoms are things that we keep getting, like hallucinations, delusions. Negative symptoms are things that we had in our normal routine, but we no longer have because they get subtractive. So being able to understand people's emotions, or understanding people's thoughts and words, this was something that we usually had, right? But now we do not have it, right? So that is essentially what they're talking about, that this causes negative symptoms to happen, because now someone who had schizophrenia, now they do not no longer understand what's supposed to happen, right? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Amazing. Now we've got another thing that happens under what Fritz said. So first thing Fritz said is that you've got errors in self-monitoring. You can't differentiate between your own thoughts and the what your environment's telling you. Then you've got difficulty with mentalizing, which is basically understanding other people's opinions. And now you've got thinking errors and biases. So as we go about our daily lives, we discover information about the world that confirms or refutes our beliefs. This leads us to modify our views in light of new evidence. In schizophrenia, abnormal beliefs may be formed and maintained if people fail to update their by understanding based on new evidence. People with schizophrenia tend to draw conclusions based on insufficient evidence. So what they're saying here is that if you believe a certain thing, you may change your beliefs with with the way life is going, right? So I may believe that, okay, my life is horrible, nothing good happens, but let's say tomorrow I get a new car. Obviously, my belief is going to switch to, okay, you know what, I was wrong. I just have to be very, very hopeful, and good things will happen. Just give me 1 second. Right, sorry. Yeah, so my belief is going to switch immediately, right? I'm going to start thinking that, okay, yeah, good things can happen, right? Similarly, over here they're talking about how people who have schizophrenia, they are unable to do so. If they believe in something, it is very difficult for them to believe otherwise, right? They're going to keep believing the same thing, and they're going to keep staying in the same delusion, right? So they have thinking errors and biases, which means that they cannot recognize the errors in their thoughts, right? They can't recognize what's incorrect in their thoughts, and they keep believing that and be biased towards that only. So even if they find new evidence, they will still not believe it. Make sense?
I see.
Amazing. So, right, I would want you to read the evaluation. So it starts here. You've got these notes, right? So it starts here. The idea that hallucinations result from the misattribution of a person's own inner speech is an example of individual explanation. So the first thing that they're talking about is individual versus situational. So just still do not read the last paragraph. This green pointer, this green marker means that it is not necessarily included in the syllabus, right? Just read the strengths and weaknesses that are given over here, and you can ask me if there's anything that you don't get. It's pretty straightforward, and it is to do with what I've explained, so it should make sense to you. If it in any case does not, I'm right here.
Give me some time.
Okay, great. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I don't really get it for the second limitation. They say experience of influence.
This one, further support this one, or like
No,
the second. Okay, another limitation, this one.
yes, yes.
Okay, okay, great. Just give me 1 second. I'll explain it to you. Hi, I'm really sorry. I got a call. My driver stuck somewhere. Right. So another limitation is that it does not explain why people who have difficulties in mentalizing or weak central control do not develop schizophrenia while others do. It appears that the same cognitive deficits can underpin a range of different disorders, including autism and ADHD. So they're saying that this explanation does not explain that they're saying that there's a lot of people who have weak central control, which means that there's a lot of people who do not understand other people's emotions, right? How will you differentiate, or how does this explanation explain you to differentiate that these people aren't the ones that have schizophrenia? Because like they've said that people with ADHD or people with autism also do not understand other people's emotions, right? So this particular explanation does not underpin how you will know that this particular person has schizophrenia and not autism, right? Because they literally have the same symptoms. So how can you say that it's schizophrenia and not autism? And then they're saying this suggests that other factors may determine whether schizophrenia symptoms occur, and these may be socio-cultural and relate to. So they're saying that if these cognitive symptoms do not alone explain whether person has schizophrenia, you will need the biological symptoms with it, or you will need other cultural symptoms with it in order to understand if it's actually schizophrenia. Because the symptom that they're talking about, or the error in mentalizing that they're talking about, this is not just something that you can find with schizophrenia. You can find this with other disorders as well. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're just saying that this explanation, it's limited because it does not explain that part of it. Right. Issues and debates were a part of the evaluation. Okay, now we understand that schizophrenia, we understand the explanations of schizophrenia. What we really need to understand now is that how do we treat it, right? So let me just send you the next batch of notes. I'm going to overview them with you. I'm not going to start the explanations, treatments yet, but I am going to overview them with you. Right. And then we'll actually be done with schizophrenia, by the way. Mm, right, till they're sending, I'll give you an overview. Just 1 second. So where is the document that we follow? Okay, great. So like we did the explanations of schizophrenia. So we first did the physiological part of it, and then we did the psychological part of it. So similarly, with the treatments as well, you've got the physiological treatments, which includes like antipsychotics, apsychotics, which is basically your tablets and your medicines, right? And then you've obviously got your psychological treatments, which is basically therapy, right? Like talking therapy and imagery and sense key study. So I'll just send it to you as well, and then I'm going to share my screen and just overview it with you before we get into the details of it. Right. There we go. Right. So first we've in treatments. Well, first we've got like I said, we'll have the physiological treatments, which includes biochemical, of course. So you'll learn about typical antipsychotics, atypical antipsychotics, and the Texas medication algorithm, which means that typical antipsychotics are basically the first generation drugs for it. Then they had a lot of side effects, so you got atypical antipsychotics, which was second generation, and then the TMAP is basically just a project that they did. Then you obviously have your evaluation and the side effects. Then you've got another therapy which is called ECT, which is electric conclusive therapy, right? So that is going to be your second explanation for your physiological treatments. After that, you will be looking at the psychological part of it, right? Which will obviously include your CBT, right? So which is cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So this is when I was talking about therapy and I was explaining the beliefs and feelings part of it. This is the therapy part of it. So CBT is basically when you try to understand cognitive behavior and through therapy only. So you talk about it, you talk about core beliefs, you talk about self-awareness, etc., etc. Then you've got, so this is the sense key study that you will be studying in CBT, right? So that is basically a broken down study in two parts. And that's pretty much it. So that's going to be treatments, which we are going to cover in next class, not right now. But for now, I do want you to do one thing, which is if I go back to what we were discussing, right here, we've got the final questions, right? So like we obviously do topical questions every single time. I don't want you to do the, yeah, so one, two, not three. Yeah, I just one or two right now. Baki, there's all paper two questions. So I do want you to just open up the uh, document that you're following and do question number one and two in that, which is all about your explanations. And here it is, the same document. So I'll just write it. Explanations, sorry, explanations. Here it is. And at the same time, I want to discuss the timings for tomorrow's class. Tomorrow's Friday, so can we take class at like the same timings that we do, 9 p.m., not a.m.? Does that work?
Yes,
Amazing. So I'll be taking another class by 9 p.m. tomorrow. And right now, I just want you to complete the questions. If you've got any questions at all, you can always ask. Hey, are you done?
Yeah, I think so. For the
That's
first
fine.
question.
I would want you to finish this and drop me an email as soon as you're done because then I'm gonna check it right away. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Great. Okay. We'll see you tomorrow at 9 p.m. then.
All right, miss.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.